This is me, July 29th, 2008. It is 12:33 Mountain Time. Covering all my bases, making sure that if something happens to me or my family or all of us, that our assets are documented.
In December of 2009, the mysterious disappearance of 28-year-old Susan Powell shook West Valley City, Utah, and soon captured national attention. Susan was a young mother of two, described as kind, outgoing, and deeply devoted to her family. But behind the smiles, Susan was living in a strained marriage with her husband, Josh Powell. Friends and relatives say Susan and Josh's relationship was rocky, marked by financial problems, Josh's controlling behavior, and his increasingly disturbing family dynamics. Josh's father, Stephen Powell, was also a looming presence. Later, investigators discovered that Stephen harbored an unhealthy obsession with Susan, going so far as to secretly record her and collect personal items. On the morning of December 7, 2009, Susan did not show up for work, and concern quickly spread. At the Powell home, her purse, cell phone, and identification were all left behind, but Susan was missing. When questioned, Josh claimed he had taken their two young sons on a last-minute camping trip in the middle of the night during a freezing snowstorm. His story immediately raised red flags. The more police investigated, the more troubling details emerged. Susan had confided in friends, co-workers, and even church members that she feared for her safety. She even wrote a secret will, stating that if anything ever happened to her, it may not be an accident. In her journals, she described feeling trapped in her marriage and worried about her husband's temper. She also recorded a video to cover all her bases in case anything were to happen.
This is me, July 29th, 2008. It is 12:33 Mountain Time. Covering all my bases, making sure that if something happens to me or my family or all of us, that our assets are documented. Hope everything works out and we're all happy and live happily ever after as much as that's possible. Charlie, say hi.
Detectives named Josh a person of interest, but without physical evidence, no charges were filed. Attention later turned to Josh's father, Stephen, after police found disturbing recordings and evidence of his obsession with Susan. He was later convicted on unrelated charges of child pornography and voyeurism. As the years went by, Susan's family held out hope for answers. Then, in 2012, the case took an even darker turn. During a supervised visitation with his sons, Charlie and Braden, Josh suddenly locked a social worker outside his home. The social worker dialed 911 for help.
But I think I need help right away. He's on a very short lease with DSHS, and CPS has been involved. And this is the craziest thing. He looked right at me and closed the door. And I'd like to pull out of the driveway because I smell gasoline and he won't let me in. This could be life-threatening. He went to court on Wednesday and he didn't get his kids back. And this is really, I'm afraid for their lives. He blew up the house and the kids. He slammed the door in my face. So I kept knocking. I thought it was a mistake. Kids were one step ahead of me. They're 5 and 7. They were one step ahead of me, and he slammed the door in my face.
Moments later, Josh set the house on fire, and the house erupted in flames. Josh had deliberately set the fire with gasoline, killing himself and his two little boys in a murder-suicide. However, he first killed his sons with a hatchet before setting the blaze. Investigators later discovered disturbing details. Drawings from the boys suggesting they had seen their mother in the trunk of a car, and statements indicating they had witnessed events connected to Susan's disappearance. Despite this, Susan's remains were never found. To this day, Susan Powell's case remains unsolved. Many believe Josh murdered his wife and hid her body, but without concrete evidence, no definitive answers exist. Her disappearance, followed by the horrific loss of her children, stands as one of the most haunting tragedies in true crime history. Susan Powell's story is a chilling reminder of the dangers of domestic abuse, the importance of listening to victims, and the devastating impact of secrets kept behind closed doors. January 25, 2019, was a quiet winter morning in Tomball, Texas. Elizabeth Barraza, who went by Liz, was setting up for a simple garage sale in her driveway. It was meant to be a sweet moment. She and her husband were planning a trip to Orlando for their 5th wedding anniversary. Little did she know, this would become the most haunting morning of her life. Liz was a devoted volunteer with the 501st Legion, spreading joy to children in hospitals through her love of Star Wars. Thoughtful, cheerful, and full of life, she and her husband loved to cosplay together and were happily planning their next adventure. Moments after Liz's husband left for work, around 6:52 a.m., surveillance cameras captured a menacing scene. A dark-colored, late-model Nissan Frontier truck approaches. A person, disguised in a wig and heavy clothing, steps out and walks toward Liz. She offers a polite good morning, the last words she would ever say. Within seconds, 4 gunshots ring out. The shooter flees, only to return moments later, perhaps ensuring the grim task was complete. Liz was rushed to Memorial Hermann Hospital but tragically passed away the next morning. Her parents, Bob and Rosemary Newell, described her passing as unimaginable. Watching a joyful community member taken so senselessly was devastating. Friends held vigils, waving lightsabers in her memory. Investigators treated the case with urgency. Surveillance footage, neighbor cameras, and digital tools became key. Despite grappling with minimal physical evidence, authorities tracked the truck and suspected the crime was premeditated. 6 years later, the case remains unsolved. There is a $50,000 reward still being offered through Crime Stoppers for information leading to an arrest. 6 years on, Liz's warmth, kindness, and the love she shared continue to resonate. Her story isn't just a tragedy, it's a call to honor her memory by seeking truth. December 27, 2010. Hailey Dunn, a bright and spirited cheerleader from Colorado City, Texas, vanished without a trace. It was the day after Christmas, and what began as a normal afternoon spiraled into a nightmare. Hailey was last seen around 3 p.m. that day, leaving her mother's house, where she lived with her brother David and her mother's boyfriend, Sean Atkins. Hailey told Sean she was going to her father's home and then to a friend's for a sleepover, but she never arrived at either place. Her friend later confirmed they had no such plans. Her mother, Billie Jean Dunn, filed a missing person report the next day. Investigators initially treated it as a runaway case, but soon reclassified it to a missing child. Sean Atkins quickly became the lead person of interest. He was the last one to claim to have seen Hailey. His timeline was riddled with inconsistencies. For instance, while he claimed he was back in Colorado City by late afternoon, cell phone data revealed he was still in Big Spring until around 2:40 p.m., making his return timeline questionable. Additional red flags surfaced. Searches of his and Billie's home uncovered disturbing printed pages on serial killers, hints of extreme and deranged interests, and even child pornography on a memory stick. Both Sean and Billie failed polygraph tests. After years of searching, in March 2013, a hiker discovered skeletal remains near Lake J.B. Thomas, about 20 miles from Colorado City, and they were verified to be Hailey's. The death was ruled a homicide. It wasn't until June 2021, over a decade later, that Sean Atkins was arrested for Hailey's murder. Authorities believed he struck her with a blunt object and concealed her body. 1 year later, in December 2022, a grand jury indicted him on murder and evidence tampering charges. Prosecutors shared that he allegedly struck Hailey in the head with an object, causing her death, and then disposed of her remains. In June 2023, a major twist. Prosecutors filed a motion to drop the charges without prejudice, meaning they could potentially refile them, citing the need for further investigation. Hailey Dunn's life was full of promise: cheerleading, school band, sports, and a radiant personality. But she's now remembered through the tragedy of a silence that should never have descended over a child so full of potential. Her case remains unsolved, and her family continues to seek justice, urging anyone with information to come forward. On February 28, 2019, just a day after his 20th birthday, Matthew Anfeldt vanished under deeply troubling circumstances near Grand Mound, Washington. What started as an ordinary day quickly spiraled into a chilling mystery that would haunt his family for nearly 5 years. Matthew, born January 27, 1999, was passionate about music and wrestling. Under the rap alias MT Hayes, he shared his freestyle tracks online.
You say you wanted it. I know you over there, but you said you just wanted it. I'm on top, always never stop. Flame so hot, I know I like to hustle. My flag.
Another passion, wrestling, taught him discipline. But music was where he found his voice. He had also battled substance abuse but had recently completed treatment and was committed to staying clean. By February 2019, things seemed to be looking up. But previously, on December 22, 2018, Matthew experienced a terrifying attack. Walking home late, he was followed by 3 hooded figures. They assaulted him, slashed him, and carved the word "kill" into his chest before vanishing. In a state of shock, he made a distressed video of himself covered in blood and crying, but then deleted it. Terrified and silent, he refused medical care or police involvement, saying only that people were after him. But he declined to say who they were. On the evening of February 28, 2019, Matthew spent the day bowling with his sister. Between 4 o'clock and 4:30 p.m., they returned home and planned to watch movies in her room. Just after 5 p.m., he stood up to grab his phone and never came back. Within minutes, frantic 911 calls started flooding in. A neighbor saw Matthew at her door, panicked and crying. He claimed his family had been murdered and that people were after him, before running off into the cold, barefoot and disoriented. He sprinted into traffic, causing cars to swerve, and even jumped onto a car hood and into a truck bed as he continued fleeing. About 2 miles away, he burst into a Speedway grocery store in a nearly deranged state. He was sweating, had blood around his mouth, and was screaming that his family was dead and they were after him. He bolted out the door as the clerk dialed 911. That was the last confirmed sighting of Matthew. Search efforts were immediate and extensive. Ground teams, K-9 units, drones, and volunteers combed the rural terrain. Neighborhoods were canvassed. Homes, crawl spaces, and fields were checked. Yet no trace of Matthew emerged. On October 28, 2023, nearly 5 years later, a hunter in the Rochester Grand Mound area discovered human remains. Detectives and K-9 search teams were dispatched immediately. The remains were officially confirmed on November 2nd to belong to Matthew. Despite the breakthrough of finding remains, investigators have yet to determine the cause of death or whether foul play was involved. The investigation remains open. Matthew was a dreamer, an artist, a wrestler, a family-loving son with goals and a future. His disappearance and quiet return 5 years later left more questions than answers. But his story matters, and his life deserves justice. If you have any information, please contact the Thurston County Sheriff's Office. In June 2004, Stephen Williard Anderson, a father and entrepreneur from Murray, Utah, suddenly vanished, leaving his life behind. He left home to drive over 200 miles to his family's cabin near Flaming Gorge, planning to paint the deck, but he never arrived, and his disappearance remained a haunting mystery for 2 decades. Stephen was loved by his children for being engaging, creative, and full of big ideas. He ran multiple local businesses and cherished family time at the cabin, memories his children still hold dearly. After he failed to arrive, his father called both Stephen's phone and the cabin, but there was no answer. 2 days later, his father went to the cabin and confirmed he'd never been there. Concerned, the family reported him missing. For years, the case remained unresolved. The Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office and Unified Police turned over every stone, but no sign of Stephen emerged until September 2024, when a nonprofit group, United Search Corps, joined forces with reality TV star Dave Sparks from the show Diesel Brothers to revisit the cold case. A submerged 2001 Toyota Sequoia, matching Stephen's leased SUV, was discovered about 50 feet underwater in Starvation Reservoir by the team. In February 2025, DNA testing by the Utah Medical Examiner confirmed that the remains found inside the vehicle were indeed those of Stephen. No foul play is suspected, and the case was officially closed. Although this is not my typical content to cover, grief remains, but the family now has answers. This case reminds us how vital perseverance and collaboration can be in resolving cold cases. On May 29, 2016, Diana Alvarez vanished from her San Carlos Park home in Lee County, Florida. At just 9 years old, the disappearance of such a young, vibrant life sent ripples through the community and sparked a long, relentless search for answers. That evening, Diana simply disappeared from her bed. Her mother realized she was gone at the start of the next day, and an Amber Alert was issued 4 days later. Authorities quickly zeroed in on Jorge Manuel Guerrero Torres, a man who had been renting a room in Diana's home. Disturbingly, he admitted to investigators that he had engaged in abuse of Diana while staying there. Digital evidence later revealed disturbing images of Diana on his phone. In 2017, he was convicted on federal CP charges and sentenced to 40 years in prison. In May 2018, a grand jury indicted Guerrero Torres for first-degree murder, kidnapping, and lewd and lascivious molestation, even though Diana's body had not yet been found. Authorities made it clear they believed justice must be served, no matter how long it took. Nearly 4 years later, in March 2020, surveyors working in a remote area of Osceola County stumbled upon human remains in a wooded patch where law enforcement had previously tracked the suspect's phone activity. The remains were positively identified as those of Diana Alvarez. In March 2024, after years of waiting and heartbreak, Guerrero Torres pled guilty to kidnapping and murdering Diana. Prosecutors offered to remove the death penalty in exchange for a plea, securing a life sentence instead. During proceedings, Diana's mother, Rita Hernandez, stated, "May God forgive you, because I'm not going to forgive you." Though the court has delivered resolution, the emotional toll remains. For Diana's family and the community, the darkest days are etched forever, but at least the legal chapter has closed. Denise was known as a kind and intelligent young woman. She lived alone in an apartment and was close to her family. But in the spring of 1971, her ordinary life would take a chilling turn. On the morning of April 13th, Denise spoke with her father on the phone. He later reported that she seemed unusually distressed, though he didn't know why. When he couldn't reach her again later that day, he grew concerned. When he arrived at her apartment, what he found was alarming. The door was unlocked. The TV and stereo were left running. Denise's purse, car, and personal belongings were still inside. Investigators launched a search, but from the very beginning, the case was puzzling. There were no signs of forced entry or a struggle. It appeared as if Denise had simply stepped out and never returned. Rumors swirled that she might have left voluntarily, but her family quickly dismissed that idea. Denise had no history of running away, and she was deeply attached to her loved ones. Despite decades of investigation, Denise Kathleen Anderson's fate remains unknown. She is officially classified as endangered missing. Her family has never stopped hoping for answers, and her case is still open with Sacramento authorities. It's been over 50 years since Denise disappeared without a trace. Somewhere, someone knows what happened. If you have any information about the disappearance of Denise Kathleen Anderson, please contact the Sacramento Police Department.